faithfully sharing valuable insights by interpreting the world's best books. Hi, this is Sally here to talk about books. Today, I'll be interpreting this book for you titled Spain. How did Spain become Spain? The author is a renowned British historian, a history professor at the University of Exeter. Jeremy Black. Spain has a land area of about 506,000 square kilometers, equivalent to China's Sichuan province, ranking fourth in Europe. Even though it's just a medium-sized country now, back in the 16th and 17th centuries, Spain's territory stretched across both sides of the Atlantic and into the Pacific, encompassing places like today's Philippines, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and Argentina. At that time, Spain was a true empire where the sun never sets, a title that wasn't taken by the British Empire until the 18th century. Although its former might has long faded, Spain still holds a certain standing in the international community. Spanish is the world's second most spoken language, with over 400 million native speakers. Many countries in the Americas have it as an official language and have created brilliant cultures. For example, some of South America's most famous literary figures, like Chilean poet Pablo Neruda, Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, and Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez, all wrote in Spanish. Spanish cuisine, football, bullfighting, and more also have a wide following. Spain has topped the World Tourism Competitiveness rankings for 3 years in a row. It welcomes 50 million international tourists every year. You could say that, through its cultural soft power, Spain has remained one of the most influential countries, from Europe's edge to a global empire, and then to a cultural powerhouse. How did Spain get to where it is today? Today, we're discussing this book, How Did Spain Become Spain? By tracing Spain's past and present, the author shows the winding history of a nation's formation and development. I'll split it into 2 parts, upper and lower, with a total of 6 sections to cover. For today's upper part, we'll go over 3 sections. Part 1, the battlefield of competing powers. Part 2, the Christian Reconquest. Part 3, establishing a global empire. All right, now let's dive into Part 1, the battlefield of competing powers. To understand a country's history, we first need to grasp its geographical setting. In southern Europe, there are 3 major peninsulas. From east to west, the Balkan Peninsula, the Apennine Peninsula, and the Iberian Peninsula. Spain is located on the Iberian Peninsula, almost entirely surrounded by the sea, with only the northeast bordering continental Europe. In this border area is traversed by the towering and steep Pyrenees Mountains. This poses a significant barrier to human interaction. In contrast, the Strait of Gibraltar at Spain's southern tip is only 14 kilometers wide. Crossing it leads to North Africa. If sailing eastward, one would quickly reach what is now Italy. Such geographical conditions meant that, compared to Western Europe, Spain's history is more intertwined with North Africa and Southern Europe. So, in fact, for a long time, it was a battlefield contested by various powers. Archaeology shows that human footprints appeared on the Iberian Peninsula over 8,000 years ago. It is speculated that these early settlers came from North Africa by crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, bringing farming techniques with them. But settlements in the water-rich southeastern coast gradually expanded inland. This wasn't easy because central Spain is a vast plateau with a dry climate, scarce rainfall, making agriculture difficult to develop. This limited the population size and economic scale, and couldn't support a centralized government. Thus, Spain remained in a primitive societal state for a long time, dotted with tribes of various sizes. They governed themselves independently, relying on farming or cross-sea trade for livelihood. But this situation was disrupted in the 3rd century BC, when Spain became a battlefield for 2 major powers vying for dominance.
Which 2 powers?
Ancient Rome and Carthage. Ancient Rome rose on the Apennine Peninsula, which is present-day Italy. Carthage held Sicily, Sardinia, and areas in what is now North Africa. The Romans always wanted to seize Carthage's territories to gain hegemony over the Mediterranean. From 264 BC to 241 BC, Rome and Carthage engaged in a series of battles, and eventually, the Romans captured Sicily and Sardinia, with North Africa as their next target. To reverse their defeat, Carthaginian general Hannibal landed in southeastern Spain and used it as a base to lead his army over the Pyrenees and Alps into Roman territory. The Romans were caught off guard, suffering consecutive defeats, but after finally managing to withstand Carthage's offensive, they decided to retaliate in kind. In 211 BC, Roman general Scipio raided Spain, successively capturing several key strongholds established by the Carthaginians, such as New Carthage and Cadiz. After a decade of bitter warfare, Carthage's national power waned and was forced to cede its Spanish territories to Rome. After that, it took the Romans nearly 2 more centuries to gradually conquer the indigenous tribes within Spain, which was also the process of Romanization. So-called Romanization can be understood as urbanization because the Romans particularly loved cities. They built one wherever they conquered. Cities had public spaces like squares, theaters, temples, and arenas. Between cities, they constructed roads and Roman highways. The Romans' original purpose was military. Wherever rebellion occurred, their armies could quickly arrive to suppress it. However, the Roman highways objectively promoted trade and cultural exchange, connecting different regions. The Romans also vigorously developed natural resources, especially precious metals like gold, silver, and copper. By the Roman Empire period, Spain had become the most important source of gold. Its status within the imperial territory grew increasingly important. 2 Roman emperors, Trajan and Hadrian, were born in Spain. The Romans also shaped Spanish culture. Both rural landowners and urban elites took pride in speaking Latin, drinking wine, wearing Roman attire, and imitating Roman entertainment. Bullfighting was introduced from Rome. Religiously, Christianity spread widely in the late Roman Empire and became the state religion in 312 AD. Spain was similarly deeply influenced by Christianity. It must be said that under Roman rule, Spain enjoyed 3 centuries of peace, with urban development and population growth, what historians call a golden age. Sadly, peaceful times in this world never last long. Changes in the external situation would ultimately alter Spain's fate. From the 3rd century onward, Germanic tribes migrated continuously, putting immense pressure on the Roman Empire, historically known as the barbarian invasions. In 395 AD, to disperse pressure, the Roman Empire split into eastern and western parts. Spain belonged to the Western Empire, yet this still couldn't stop the Germanic tribes' advance. They first flooded into Gaul, present-day France, then crossed the Pyrenees to invade Spain. The Visigoths, one of these Germanic tribes, gradually controlled most of Spain and converted to Christianity. However, Visigothic rule couldn't compare to the Romans. Their Visigothic kingdom was unstable with internal power struggles, leading to most kings meeting violent deaths, which gave external enemies opportunities. Which external enemy? Moors were the term used by Romans to refer to North African natives, including Ethiopians, Saharans, and others. In the 7th century, the Arab Empire conquered North Africa, and the Moors converted to Islam. Subsequently, they began to covet Spain's wealth. In 711 AD, Moorish general Tariq led thousands of soldiers to land at the southernmost tip of Spain. He named the landing point Gibraltar, meaning Mountain of Tariq in Arabic, which is the origin of the Strait of Gibraltar. At that time, the Visigothic kingdom was fragmented and no match for the Moors. The Visigothic king was killed, the Moors occupied southern and eastern Spain, and they even crossed the Pyrenees to invade southern France, but were quickly driven out, establishing the strategic importance of the Pyrenees. The natural boundary between Spain and France remains so to this day. The Moors established their capital in Córdoba in southern Spain, and the Córdoba Caliphate lasted nearly 800 years. They implemented Islamization policies, greatly increasing the Muslim population, and churches were converted into mosques. However, the territory of Córdoba was limited because the Moors failed to conquer all of Spain, Some Christians retreated to the plateaus and mountains in the north and west, establishing kingdoms, dividing the Iberian Peninsula into two worlds. One dominated by the Cordoba Caliphate in most areas, and the other by Christian kingdoms resisting from the highlands. Who will have the last laugh? In part 2, The Christian Reconquest, I will reveal the answer. In 1860 AD, the Moors advanced to central Spain and built a fortress there called Madrid. For centuries after that, the Moors and the Christian kingdoms engaged in repeated back-and-forth struggles along the Madrid line. Overall, the Moors held the advantage because the southeast coast they controlled was commercially prosperous and culturally advanced. By the early 10th century, the Cordoba Caliphate reached its peak, with its capital Cordoba highly prosperous and becoming one of Europe's most important centers of power. The Byzantine Empire and the Holy Roman Empire both established embassies there. The Arabic scientific knowledge mastered by the Moors, such as mathematics, astronomy, and navigation, was transmitted to Western Europe, and the Moors were highly inclusive. They not only promoted Arabic culture, but also encouraged scholars to study ancient Greek and Roman works, translating Greek and Latin texts into Arabic. In contrast, the Christian kingdoms in the north were weaker and had little presence in the international community. From the early 11th century, things changed, mainly because as local powers grew stronger, the Cordoba Caliphate split into several emirates. These emirates nominally revered Cordoba as orthodox, but actually ruled independently and did as they pleased. They also fought each other and sought help from the Christian kingdoms. The Moors declined due to division and infighting, while the Christian kingdoms gradually surpassed them in strength, especially the Kingdom of Castile, which led the Christian revival in Spain. Castile was originally just a small kingdom in northern Spain, but later expanded by exploiting the Moors' internal conflicts. In 1085 AD, King Alfonso VI captured two major strongholds in central Spain, Madrid and Toledo. Subsequently, Alfonso VI declared himself emperor of all Spain and officially launched the Reconquista movement. And why is it called recovering lost lands? Alfonso VI's logic was that Spain was previously ruled by Christians, and now we're just reclaiming lost territories from the Moors. Clearly, Alfonso VI was ambitious and wanted to unify Spain within his lifetime. But man proposes, God disposes. In fact, the Reconquista took over 400 years and wasn't completed until the late 15th century. Why did it take so long? It can be attributed to three reasons. First, the Moors resisted fiercely. After capturing Madrid and Toledo, the Kingdom of Castile's southward advance accelerated. Faced with a common enemy, the Moors set aside differences, united to resist, and sought help from the Berbers, North African nomads, who also practiced Islam. In October 1086, the combined forces of Berbers and Moors fought a decisive battle against the Castilian army in southwestern Spain. The Berber cavalry fought bravely, slaughtering enemies so bloodily that soldiers kept slipping. So the battlefield was later called Zalaka, meaning wet and slippery, and Alfonso VI himself was seriously wounded, escaping only by luck. In 1108, the Berber-Moor alliance defeated Alfonso VI again and killed his only heir, plunging Castile into a succession crisis. The southward expansion was forced to halt. The Reconquista progressed slowly. The second reason is constant internal and external strife. The Kingdom of Castile was the advocate of the movement, but it couldn't unite all anti-Moorish forces because Castile was just one of many Christian kingdoms. Besides it, the Kingdom of Navarre and the Kingdom of Aragon occupied the north-central and northeastern parts of Spain, controlling important areas like La Coruña and Barcelona. Additionally, in the southwest of the Iberian Peninsula, there was the Kingdom of Portugal, established by Visigothic nobles, and they also believed in Christianity. These four Christian kingdoms, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal, all wanted to expand, yet they constantly undermined each other, which drained a lot of energy and gave the Moors a breathing space. The Kingdom of Castile was also unstable internally. In medieval Europe, the feudal system was practiced, where nobles only had to fulfill certain obligations to the king, such as paying tribute and providing military service. What they did on their own lands was not interfered with. Therefore, the king's control over the nobles was limited. The same was true for Castile. This led to a situation in the Reconquista where the king and nobles each had their own demands. When demands aligned, they formed a combined force. Once disagreements arose, nobles might not listen to the king. The relationship between Alfonso VI and the noble El Cid is a prime example. El Cid's real name was Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. He was a Castilian noble who followed Alfonso VI on southern campaigns, and because of his bravery in battle, the Moors honored him as El Cid, meaning the Lord in Arabic. In later accounts, El Cid was portrayed as a Spanish national hero who fought against the Moors his whole life. But what was the actual situation? The author points out that El Cid was always most concerned with his own interests. For example, he once attacked the Moors without permission and was punished by Alfonso VI. And he simply took his troops and defected to the enemy camp. Afterwards, El Cid helped the Moors suppress rebellions, fight against external enemies, and repelled armies from kingdoms like Castile and Aragon. In 994, El Cid captured the important eastern town of Valencia and ruled there independently until his death. Alfonso VI could never do anything about him. Nobles like El Cid were not uncommon in medieval Spain. They moved between various factions to seize benefits, which slowed the progress of the Reconquista. Now let's talk about the third obstacle. Despite the slow progress, overall the Christian forces were still advancing southward. In July 2012, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal formed a four-kingdom alliance and defeated the main force of the Moors. After this battle, the Moors essentially lost their ability to counterattack and could only watch as Christian kingdoms nibbled away at their territories. By the mid-14th century, only the Emirate of Granada in southernmost Spain remained, holding out desperately. Alfonso XI of Castile was preparing for the final battle when, against all hopes, the Black Death, bubonic plague, swept Europe in 1347. Spain lost one-third of its population, lands turned desolate, crop yields plummeted, and social conflicts sharply worsened. Alfonso XI himself died in battle while besieging Gibraltar, and the Reconquista was once again interrupted. However, as Christian kingdoms completed their integration, the outlook brightened again. How did they integrate? First, through royal marriages. Castile and Navarre merged through a royal marriage. Next, Ferdinand of Aragon married the heiress of Castile, Isabella, and the two kingdoms merged into the Kingdom of Spain. Once integration was complete, the Reconquista immediately restarted. Under the Spanish kingdom's offensive, the Emirate of Granada retreated step by step. In early 1492, its capital city of Granada fell, marking the success of the Christian Reconquista. Spain achieved unification. For this achievement, Ferdinand and Isabella were granted the title of Catholic Monarchs by the Pope. Remember the year 1492, because this year also saw an event of profound significance for Spain and even world history. My narration will now enter part 3, establishing a global empire. Shortly after Spain's unification, an Italian navigator sought an audience with Queen Isabella. It was Columbus. Columbus said that, according to Marco Polo's travelogue, India and China in the east were filled with gold, so he begged the queen to fund a fleet to open trade routes and conduct trade with the east. And in August 1492, Columbus set sail with a letter from Queen Isabella to Eastern monarchs. The fleet sailed westward across the Atlantic and discovered an archipelago after over 2 months. Columbus believed this was India and named the archipelago the West Indies, but in reality, it was North America. After that, Columbus's fleet reached the Americas 3 more times, Thus, later generations regard Columbus as the discoverer of the New World. However, he himself firmly believed until his death that he had found India. Columbus's voyage opened the curtain on the age of discovery and became the prelude to European colonization of the Americas. And inspired by Columbus and driven by a longing for Eastern riches, the King of Portugal also heavily funded exploration activities. In 1497, Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama sailed from Lisbon, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and reached India. In 1500, Portuguese explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral became the first European to discover Brazil. Not to be outdone, the Spanish king funded Magellan's fleet, which in November 1521 rounded the southernmost tip of South America and sailed into a new ocean. Because the sailing was smooth for over 100 days afterward, Magellan named this sea the Pacific Ocean. This name has been used ever since. In March 1521, Magellan landed in the Philippines, initiating the Spanish colonization of the islands. Given the intense competition between Spain and Portugal, under the mediation of the Pope, they agreed to constrain their actions by a meridian line. This so-called meridian is a line of longitude running from the North Pole to the South Pole. According to the agreement, newly discovered lands west of the meridian belonged to Spain, and those to the east went to Portugal. This became known as the famous Treaty of Tordesillas. It set a precedent for European powers to divide global spheres of influence. The Treaty of Tordesillas established the colonial pattern for Portugal and Spain. Portuguese colonies were mainly in Asia and Africa. In the Americas, Portugal only had Brazil, while Spain retained only the already colonized Philippines in East Asia, focusing its main efforts and resources on conquering the American continent. Right. Well, this process was filled with bloodshed and violence. It can be said to be one of humanity's most brutal acts. Spanish colonizers first conquered Central American regions like Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Cuba, then used them as springboards to expand into North and South America. First, let's look at the North American direction. In 1519, Spanish explorer Hernán Cortés landed on the eastern coast of present-day Mexico, then under the rule of the vast and populous Aztec Empire. Surprisingly, Cortés, with only 450 Spanish soldiers, defeated the Aztec army of 100,000, captured their capital Tenochtitlan, Mexico City, and plundered it extensively. Spanish colonization in South America was equally devastating. In 1532, explorer Francisco Pizarro landed in Peru and, relying on just a few hundred soldiers, destroyed the Inca Empire. What powerful weapons did the Spaniards use to crush these two great empires without resistance? The answer lies in advanced weapons, masterful political maneuvering, and smallpox. First, let's look at the weapons. The Spanish had matchlock guns and cannons with long range and great destructive power. Meanwhile, Native American warriors only had wooden clubs and stone knives, completely outmatched. Even in close combat, Spanish soldiers had metal armor that far surpassed the cotton armor of Native Americans. Now, about political maneuvering, terms like Aztec Empire or Inca Empire were European labels. Their actual control couldn't compare to true empires. For example, various ethnic groups within the Aztec Empire had long resented Aztec rule. When the Spanish arrived, these groups helped them, like the Tlaxcalans who allied with the Spanish to deliver crushing blows to the Aztecs. The Spanish had another deadly weapon, smallpox. In medieval Europe, it was common and killed many, but survivors developed immunity. Many Spanish colonists carried smallpox. Infected natives died en masse, and survivors lost fighting capacity, clearing obstacles for colonizers. By the mid-17th century, Spanish colonies stretched from the southern U.S. through Mexico, Cuba, Guatemala, down to Peru, Chile, and Argentina, while Spain's European influence rapidly expanded. This time, though, it wasn't through war but marriage alliances. As mentioned earlier, the union of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon merged their kingdoms into Spain. Since Ferdinand also ruled southern Italy, these territories naturally became part of Spain. Later, the Spanish royalty married into the Habsburg family, who originated in Austria and monopolized the Holy Roman Emperor title for over 350 years, starting mid-15th century. Their domains covered modern Germany, Austria, eastern France, Netherlands, and Belgium, making them Europe's largest power. The Spanish royalty couldn't believe their luck in connecting with such relatives. Of course, the Habsburgs had their own agenda. They coveted Spain's overseas colonies. In 1529 AD, Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I died, succeeded by his grandson Charles V, already King of Spain, who inherited the imperial throne. Thus, two empires merged, creating unprecedented territory, making Spain history's first empire where the sun never sets. The Spanish Empire was not only powerful in national strength, but also achieved remarkable accomplishments in culture and arts, which was related to its frequent exchanges with Italy due to its territories there. Starting in the 14th century, Italy produced a large number of artistic giants, such as the three literary masters, Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio, and the three art masters, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci. Before them, artists' themes were biblical stories aimed at promoting Christian teachings and encouraging people to do good. The artistic giants turned their attention to individuals, raising the banner of humanism and initiating the Renaissance movement. This great cultural transformation soon spread to Spain. During the reigns of Charles V and his eldest son, Philip II, both enthusiastically invited Italian artists to create, and nobles flocked to Italy to study literature and art. Spain gradually formed its own artistic schools, notably the Catalan school and the Seville school. In literature, a brilliant star rose. It was Cervantes. In 1547, Cervantes was born near Madrid. In his youth, he served as a soldier, traveling through Greece, Italy, North Africa, and other places, gaining rich experience and being influenced by the Renaissance. After retiring from the military, Cervantes devoted himself to writing poetry, plays, and novels. In his later years, he completed the monumental work Don Quixote, which depicts a country gentleman who becomes obsessed with chivalric novels, imagining himself as a knight roaming the world to uphold justice. Don Quixote was immediately acclaimed and swept across Europe upon its release. Over the following centuries, this novel was translated into English, French, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, and became a world classic. The scene in the novel where Don Quixote battles windmills is especially etched in people's minds. Therefore, Cervantes became a cultural icon of Spain. Today, the institution established by the Spanish government to promote the Spanish language and spread Spanish culture is called the Cervantes Institute. However, the author of this book believes that Don Quixote has another overlooked value. It foreshadowed the decline of the Spanish Empire. You see, Don Quixote imagined himself as a medieval knight, but in his time, knights were long extinct. Thus, he encountered setbacks everywhere, showing that Don Quixote couldn't keep up with the times, exactly the situation the Spanish Empire faced. On the surface, it's thriving and unmatched in Europe, but in reality, new ideologies surged in countries like Britain and France, from the Enlightenment, constitutional monarchy, to the French Revolution, and then the Industrial Revolution. Their power skyrocketed, while Spain was slow to react. Stuck in the dream of its empire where the sun never sets, unwilling to wake up. Indeed, shortly after Cervantes' death, Spain plummeted from its peak to rock bottom. Its imperial achievements vanished into thin air. In the next episode, I'll narrate this process. All right, that's the end of How Did Spain Become Spain, Part 1. That's the end of the book notes. Below the audio, we'll see you next time.